Natchez Trace Parkway, the last days of Meriwether Lewis. A car travels along the Natchez Trace in autumn.
When you're traveling on the trace, then you're basically taking a journey through history.
Family of four passes a stone marker.
And when you come up and actually walk on an original section of the old trace, right here at the Meriwether Lewis site, you're actually literally following in the footsteps of Meriwether Lewis.
In a painting, a man in a striped shirt rides a horse, October 10, 1809.
Well, Meriwether Lewis was pretty big at the time that he traveled on the trace.
In a painting, Lewis travels by boat.
He had 3 years ago returned from an expedition that nobody thought he would survive. He and all of the people who came back with him had done extraordinary things, seen things that nobody other than American Indians, of course, had seen before.
Kristen Maxfield, Park Ranger.
When Lewis returned from the expedition, Thomas Jefferson rewarded him by making him the governor of the Upper Louisiana Territory, which was most of the Louisiana Purchase.
Small islands covered with trees dot the Mississippi.
Being governor of the Upper Louisiana Territory, Lewis had a little bit of trouble with the bureaucracy. Lewis was a military leader. He was brilliant at that. But adjusting to the bureaucracy was a little bit harder. When he was the governor of the Upper Louisiana Territory, the administration changed. So he had several of the vouchers he sent to Washington denied, which meant that Meriwether Lewis was actually financially responsible for them, which meant he was basically broke.
In reenactment, Lewis travels the trace on a black horse.
That's why he was on his way from St. Louis to Washington, D.C. to go talk with the Secretary of War who had the power to approve those vouchers.
A low sun illuminates the foliage of autumn trees.
William Clark was actually worried about him a little bit because he was so distressed about these unpaid vouchers. So Lewis continued on up the trail, and he came to Grinder's stand.
A woman greets Lewis.
So Mrs. Grinder allowed Lewis to stay at her stand. She gave the house up to him. The Grinders heard 2 gunshots. Mrs. Grinder then found Meriwether Lewis bleeding. He was still alive, but he died very early in the morning of October 11th, 1809. James Neely, the Chickasaw agent, made it to Grinder's stand and interviewed Mrs. Grinder about what happened. We have 3 different accounts with Mrs. Grinder that all lead to the same conclusion, that Meriwether Lewis had committed suicide. The evidence certainly points to that. Since no one saw it happen, there will probably always be a little room for doubt. William Clark actually wrote to his brother, "Oh, I fear the weight of his mind overcame him."
At a monument, a stone column rests atop a pyramid of stone blocks.
James Neely, the Chickasaw agent, had Meriwether Lewis buried near the stand where he died. The monument itself, it's a shaft that is broken at the top, and that basically symbolizes a life cut short. The Latin inscription on the monument basically says, "I died too young, but my country will live out my life for me." We'll probably never know for sure whether Meriwether Lewis committed suicide or died by some other means. But the fact that people still come 200 years later to pay respects to this man who helped open up the West kind of indicates that maybe what we should be focusing on is who he was and what he accomplished, rather than how he died.
In a painting, Lewis rides a brown horse on the Natchez Trace. Elsewhere along the parkway, a golden sun sets over a quiet stretch of road. Titles appear: Natchez Trace Parkway, National Park Service, U.S. Department of the Interior, 662-680-4027, or www.nps.gov/NATR.